Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon what time of day you tune in, of course. I am Menelik Fernandez, and this is Run It Back. Welcome to episode number 69. I'm always excited to have you guys tune in, watch. I hope you continue to get value out of this. The premise of this show remains the same, of course. We take teams that have played previously and we run it back, so to speak, where we talk about what went into the preparation for the game, all the fun niche things like matchups and style of play and how we prepare, and then of course in-game adjustments and if we would do the same thing again. And then I've been very fortunate since the beginning to have coaches from the game join us, and this continues again today. So today uh, we are looking at Vllaznia versus Peja, which is Albanian first division teams. Game took place in April of 2021, so of course during the COVID season. And we're very fortunate to have Coach Matt Jones join us, who is the head coach of Vllaznia, to lend the perspective of preparation from them. Matt, if you give me a second, let me try and do you justice with a warm introduction to the show. I'm very excited to have you here, of course. I got to meet you in person finally in Summer League most recently and hang out with you a little bit. So getting to know you more than just the topical like, hey, that's a great coach type deal has been awesome. But Matt, he ran Matt Jones Hoops since 2014, which is a basketball training and event consulting company. He was a GA at the D2 level at Spring Hill College, where he finished his master's degree. He was an assistant coach at Miami-Dade. He was both the program director and the national team coach at Combine Academy. And then at the pro levels, he's been an assistant coach at Maccabi Ashdod and a head coach for KB Vllaznia that we're taking a look at. Please correct my pronunciation of that. I'm really, really happy to have you here, man. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. So Matt, give us a little bit of a rundown of the league in Albania when we start, just for anybody who wouldn't know, just what the league consists of, the level of play, how many games there would be in the COVID shortened season, and all that kind of topical stuff, so we can get a sense of where you're coming from.
Yeah, so it was actually an interesting year for them. The league itself, all of the other surrounding countries, Montenegro, Serbia, etc., they all started their season on time. Where guys are showing up around August, September. The Albanian government didn't let any sports start until January. So it's kind of a particularly unique year because we played a shortened season. So I was actually only over there for about 4.5 months. And that kind of brought some challenges to the table because all of the local countries, Montenegro, Serbia, some of the ones I listed, they came into Albania and took all the good national players.
Right.
So when our season started, a lot of players I would have normally had were playing in other neighboring countries. So I didn't really get a full roster until towards the end of the season. So obviously that led to some challenges. It's like a lot of international coaches will tell you, you're only as good as your local players. Imports are great and all that, but guys 5 through 9 on your team are also pretty important. So that being said, the league was a little more unique. They allowed more imports on each team. So there were a couple of teams, including ourselves, who had 4 or 5 imports instead of the normal 3 or 4. So that, brought a different dynamic. But there were, this year, there ended up being just 7 teams in the league. It was all Albanian teams. The league usually that they had just created was going to have teams from Kosovo, Montenegro, and some from some surrounding countries. But this year it was just Albanian teams, with the exception of this game we're actually watching. They did one crossover series where we actually played teams from Kosovo. So Peja, who we're playing in this film, is one of probably the top 3 teams traditionally in Kosovo. And basketball in Kosovo is a pretty big deal, probably a level higher than it is in Albania. But Kosovo and Albania are somewhat like brother and sister countries. The people share a similar language. There's just like a brotherhood there of sorts. So it was a big deal when we played this game. But going back to the style of play in this league, Definitely a more traditional, old school. Every team had a 6'8", 275-pound guy who was going to post up hard on the block and try to bully you. And, we didn't really have how I went to play. We didn't really have a guy like that on our roster. So how we had to defend some things was different. And in this game, you'll see, they've got a big old guy who's going to sit his butt down on the block and just try to bury you. And we struggled with it at times in this game, but in general, pretty much every team we played had a guy like that. So that was probably the biggest difference in terms of style of play that like stuck out to me.
Would you be the only international coach in this league?
I was the only American coach for sure. And it definitely, it was a big deal that they hired this young American coach. So it was definitely a unique experience in that regard as well.
Bit of a target on your back, so to speak.
A target and probably then some.
Okay, gotcha. So then let's talk about this game itself. Tell me a little bit about where you are in your season when it's taking place. Had you played them before? And, like what it means to your season to be able to win or lose. You mentioned it's a bit of a crossover game, if it even counts for your standings. And then we'll get into a little bit about like how you started preparing after that.
Yeah, it was definitely an exhibition type game, but we were expected to win. So going into it, we knew we were going to play a team from Kosovo, and I think they did some sort of random draw. So I only had maybe 4 days to prepare for this game, and it came at a really rough time. We were dealing with some injuries. Had a couple of guys who were just coming off injury where this was going to be their first game back. So it was definitely a very difficult time in the season. Really only had 3 or 4 days to prepare, and that includes 1 day to travel. And our day to travel, actually, we got stuck at the border between Albania and Kosovo over COVID-related issues. So we were supposed to have be able to shoot around and all that the day before, but a 5-hour delay, we missed our shoot around time. So it was just even adventure getting there.
Yeah, people don't always understand the intricacies of what goes into the organization for sure. So let's talk about those 4 or 5 days of getting ready and your scout. What does a scout look like for Coach Jones? Are you doing paper copies? Are you doing video? What's the substance of actually what goes into it? And are you doing it all yourself, or do you have assistant coaches that are taking on some of the brunt of it?
My assistant coach, while I was with Vllaznia, he was a local guy. He had played for the club, played for the national team. So he had been around the league a long time. And a lot of the coaches in the league had been there a while or just bounced from team, club to club. So he was a super resource for me in that regard, because he could pretty much tell me, this coach has been doing it the same way for 10 years. These are, kind of what the actions he's trying to get or how he's trying to play. So that was helpful. But I was doing all the scouts myself. So for me, usually watch 2 games, maybe 3, depending.
Right.
And then just I'm really only worried about what they run, the 3 things they run most. So I would put together a little edit, maybe 2 minutes tops with, the set with 3 different options they ran out of it. So maybe 9 plays total, plus sideline or baseline out of bounds. So I'm all about the KISS theory, keep it simple, stupid. So that's really what I try to keep in mind with the video stuff. So I would put together a video, send it to maybe 2 or 3 days before, and just the team group message, say, hey, check it out. We're going to start going through this stuff today. And it's pretty easy when I say, hey, get into the horn set I showed, with the scout team. And if they don't have a clue of what the horn set is, that just tells me they haven't really watched the video. And then just scouting report wise, I would just put usually the top 7 guys, the 2 or 3 things they do, if they're right-handed, if they're left-handed. And then over there, what I started doing was just putting what type of experience they have, just because there are a lot of the import players are first-year guys, rookies versus, a 10-year pro. I think it's important with scouting-wise, knowing, am I playing a veteran player over there? Because the veteran players over there, they know how to draw fouls. They know the style of play. They know the referees, all of those things. So I think that's important to know, saying, hey, hey, Johnny, you're going to be guard number 12. He's played for 10 years and he plays on the Serbian national team. You're going to have your hands full that night. And I think you should know that. So that was kind of my scouting process. Nothing, super difficult. I do the seven best players and what they do, and then what 2 or 3 offensive tendencies, 2 or 3 defensive tendencies, and then 2 or 3 keys that I think are important to win. Win the rebound battle, or make them play in the half court, or just very simple things. And so I would put those on the scouting report, and then pregame I would make sure I'm big on making sure we reiterate the same things in the scouting report, like the 2 or 3 things we need to win. I put on the scouting report, or the 2 or 3 things we have written on the board before, maybe slightly altered in terms of how what we exactly want, but just making sure there's consistency, because I've as a player and then just coaching, I've been with coaches where there's not always the carryover, and I want them to make sure they understand I mean what I say, and I say what I mean.
Right. I got a couple questions in there. First, do you deliver the same scout to your assistant first and then sort of go through it together, or does everybody get the same thing? And then second from that, if one of the players has somebody that, like, as you mentioned, hey, he's a 10-year pro, played for the Serbian national team, you're going to have your hands full type deal. Will you give them, that individual player that's guarding that person, a little bit more, like particular edit, or a little bit more talk about what you want to do specifically? Are there any additives that go in for you?
My assistant coach, he pretty much received the scout when everybody else did. Obviously, he and I had talked before. Right. He was always very familiar. So, he would tell me what he thought. I would write that down before I even started the scout. And I'm like, all right, I need to keep these things in mind. I need to look for, this flex action they say they always run, or whatever it might be. And then in terms of defensively, I had 2 pretty good defenders on my team. I wasn't making extra edits for them, but there was definitely in the days leading up saying, hey, when you're watching the scout, or I would send them a link to the team's most recent film and say, hey, when you're watching number 12, watch that he likes to shot fake, or he's very left-handed, and just, you got to be prepared for that. And just starting to talk to him about it 2 or 3 days early. And that way, the day of the game, they're not going to be, caught off guard when I say, hey, you're going to want to sit on his left hand, or whatever it might be. And I would like to have a particular edit saying, hey, here's a minute of just what number 12 does, but small level European basketball, there's just not enough time in the day to do those type of things.
For sure. Which leads me to my next question. In terms of film, like, are you guys using Synergy over there? How are you drawing all the clips? Like, this is a between nations game. They're not in your league. So how are you getting the film on them?
Film was tricky, to say the least. So I did have access to some film. It wasn't on Synergy, but I was able to their basketball is just so popular in general. It's pretty easy to hunt stuff down online. Sometimes you'd have to go to the TV networks and screen capture. Sometimes they're just using YouTube. Right. Sometimes I would just ask my assistant coach if he could hunt it down, and all of a sudden I'd have it, and I just wouldn't ask questions of how we got it. So it's definitely a little bit behind the times in that regard. But in general, it was pretty easy for me most times. Just go to YouTube or find a link and, chop it up, screen capture it, send it to the players, do whatever. But it's definitely not the most ideal of situations at times.
I hear you. So for this particular game, what did you, after doing your whole preparation process, what were the specifics that you had identified as being your advantages? And then when you did your walkthroughs, as you mentioned, like, you key in on a couple defensive actions or a couple offensive plays, how are you conveying those advantages to your guys? What were you telling them to look for? What were you looking to execute?
They had Peja had 3 really good bigs. They like to play 2 of the 3, sometimes all 3 together, because the one could kind of play the 3 spot. So I thought we could beat them some in transition. So we're trying to get up and down, but it was a tough thing because like I said, we were also shorthanded. So I didn't have, when you get playing fast, I didn't have a ton of people to sub. So we were trying to be more opportunistic and running than we normally probably would. They had a smaller point guard who had played a lot of play. I mean, he was probably 7 or 8 year pro, but he was smaller and not a great shooter.
So we had some pretty decent sized guards. All my guards were 6'3", 6'4". So we were going to try to post him some and make him work, make him defend. So some matchup based stuff. But to be honest, this was a game where like we were just going to have to outwill them, because I just didn't like my best player I had on my team. This was the very first game he played. And I was dealing with injuries. So it was one of those things where I was like, we're going to have a game plan, but it's really going to come down to like, we're just going to have to grind this out and just find a way. And that was the second question. I'm sorry.
The second part of it was when you had identified what those advantages were. So like, let's say you're saying, hey, this is a tough one, we're going to have to grind it out. Or you were saying like, when they had the three bigs on the floor, the one moves to the three and maybe we want to attack him more. What were the conveyances to the guys that you were actually saying like, this is what I think our advantage is, let's run more of this set to attack that guy or something?
Yeah. I think with this team in particular, and I think there's some clips of this, we ran a lot of ball screen motion, and this was a team who definitely, if you looked at when I went back and looked at their scores, they're giving up 90 points a game, which in European basketball is a ton of points. So It was a team that didn't really strike me as someone who really wants to guard. So we spent a lot of time talking, being opportunistic when we can run, but when we get in the half court, we're going to run our ball screen motion, and we're going to try to get the ball to 2 or 3 sides of the floor, because they don't want to defend for more than 10 or 12 seconds.
Right.
And we were able to have some success out of it, grinding them a little bit in that regard. So that's with this team I had over there. I had, it wasn't as talented local player wise. And a lot of my import American guys were younger players. And so just getting them to really buy into like run this stuff through, and we're going to get such easy looks. And I had some playmaking guards, especially at the point guard spot, where I had to reiterate to them over and over and over, like, you're going to get the ball back, on the second or third side and ball screen motion, and then go do your thing. Getting that through their heads that, that initial ball screen and ball screen motion is almost just a formality, and just get the ball, get rid of the ball, and just be confident you're going to get it back.
Yeah.
So I would say that was the biggest thing I was trying to convey to them going into this game.
Defensively, I ask this question a lot. Are you sort of like, if there was a spectrum on ball screen coverage, are you sort of a coach that's like, we do what we do and we do it well, versus are you on the side of we change for every game, we can implement any style, we're flexible, we're mobile with what we do in terms of ball screen coverages?
You're talking how they defend us ball screen wise?
No, I'm talking about you and your philosophy defensively. Are you
okay.
like, we're always going to do what we do and do it well, versus this week we might need to be switching 1 through 3 instead of 1 through 5 type deal?
I'm a person who kind of believes we just stick to what we do. That with this group, at least, I'm not saying that that's how I am forever, but this group, we were just so much more athletic than everyone else that, like, I didn't really think we had an excuse to not be able to do what I was asking.
Right.
We just flat hedged, got over the top, loaded the box on the weak side, and the next guy was kind of stunting, being in the active in the gap to help slow it down. And like, I just had such good athletic guards and good size and good length. I'm like, if you guys can't do this, it says more like pro basketball is going to be tough for you. Like, if you're trying to up levels and you can't do what I'm asking, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. Like, we're not going to win a lot of games, and this is probably feeling at this point. And then things like offensive rebounding, the pace of play you kind of mentioned a little bit, but like the coach's staples, so to speak, what are your philosophies on things like offensive rebounding, how many to the glass, the pace of play, how many possessions you want in a game, and like who you want to attack offensively, like which positions through in your ball screen motion? If that doesn't make sense, I can clarify. Sorry.
No, that's a good question. So I think in terms of how we're trying to score, I think the 45 cut guy on in ball screen motion, that was kind of our trigger. Obviously, you have the backdoor cut, but we started getting a lot of flare action out of it, getting a wide pin down out of it. So I had my 3. That position, I think,
he was kind of my playmaker in a lot of ways. And that doesn't necessarily being a playmaker with the ball in your hands. That might be being a playmaker to get somebody else open.
Right.
So spent a lot of time with second side actions on the triple side when a lot of that was all keyed on what the 45 cut guy would do. I also had a 4-man who could just catch and rip out of that. A guy who played in the G League, pretty good player who could just rip and go out of it. So that was something we kind of keyed in offensively that we were trying to get. And then remind me the first part, 2 parts of the question.
The offensive rebounding philosophy, like how many to the glass, and then the pace of play you touched on a little bit in terms of you guys being athletic, but do you set anything like goals for how many possessions or first 8 seconds we're looking to shoot, or score fast, like just what you're conveying to your guys?
So those are both kind of funny questions. So for me, the offensive rebounding thing, we were sending 2, but a constant battle I was having in my head. So the very first game of the season, we had like 27 offensive rebounds. It was absurd because we were just so athletic, but we got killed on runouts. We ended up losing the game like 86-80. But like we were just so much more athletic than everybody, but they were killing us with easy ones on the other end. So I had to reel it back in. But part of me, there was an internal battle, especially being like a first-time head coach. I'm like, why don't we just sell out and just say, hey, we're going to give up 8 points a game where they're going to get easy ones. But if we get 25 offensive rebounds a game, I still like our chances.
Right.
In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have just bought in and sent 3 because we had, usually we had 2 of the 3 best athletes on the floor at all times. But I dialed it back, and we still were a really good offensive rebounding team. I think like 15 or 16 a game, which is still a good number, obviously. But so that was kind of an interesting battle. But yeah, we would send 2, and then if we had troubles versus like Gogo is the best team in the league, we had some issues with them. There were times we would send 4 back and just send 1 to the glass. So that was part of it. And then pace of play. Another battle with young players. Too many of my young American guys like thought this was the NBA and they're just going to come off the first ball screen and pull up. And you just can't do that with the style of play. Like I said, it's kind of almost an archaic style of play there because they're going to take you down to the other end and grind you. Or they're either going to get you take a quick shot and they're going to get a layup and burn you, or they're going to come down and grind you. So it's, pick your poison type thing. So just getting these guys to understand when is an okay time to really push and transition, when we got to get a good possession, and just understanding time and score and momentum. Like I think there's guys who understand time and score, but there's not a lot of guys who understand momentum and understand how the other team's feeling about themselves versus how we're feeling. And with us being a young team, like we had roller coaster moments where we were sky high and then we were, at the depths of despair 2 possessions later. So in general, though, I would say we played a pretty moderate pace. I wouldn't say we ran a ton. I would say we were opportunistic when we ran, but I like the stuff we run. I thought we ran good stuff. I thought we executed pretty well at times. So I was more than okay with playing in the half court.
It's interesting you mentioned momentum because to me, it's real and it's a tangible thing. And anybody who could shoot the basketball would tell you that gambler's fallacy, which of course is the concept of if I'm a 40% shooter, it doesn't matter how many I've just made in a row, I'm still just a 40% shooter. Well, anybody who can shoot the basketball will tell you that's horseshit. And that if I just made 3 in a row, it's probably going to go in. I got a real chance. It's a heat check of shooting a better percentage on this one. There's definitely a feel to the game and momentum builds into that. So it just really made my mind think of that. I appreciate that. You mentioned you have the one assistant coach who's a local. What kinds of things are you tracking in game as a coach, if anything, or do you prefer both you and your coach to be watching, using your eyes and seeing what's going on versus tracking something on the side?
The only thing I had him track consistently was what sets we were scoring out of. When we started running a lot of ball screen motion, what actions we were scoring out of. And the main thing I wanted him helping me with is just substitution wise, keeping in mind who's playing well together. And then just so much of it's matchup based. I'd say if there's one area I'm bad at is just recognizing, they're small right now or they're big right now. And And then that battle of, all right, if they go big, do I have to go big or should I go small? And that's when we try to run. And so I relied a lot on him with that, just because he had played. He had a great feel for the game.
Right.
That was like the best thing he brought. Was he was only like 2 years out of since he retired. So he was just had a really good feel for the game. I wouldn't say like he was a great coach necessarily. He's a good guy and knew the game. But he had a great feel. And so he brought he filled a void I definitely have. And so I was very appreciative of that. And he did a great job for me.
Amazing. Kudos to him. When you talk about watching the matchups and watching, sort of your rotation patterns, do you script your rotation patterns? Do you sub based upon feel and what's going on? And then with the matchups, how was he tracking that? Like he would specifically be saying like, James is guarding Matt right now. We should maybe look at making this substitution for that player.
So I was pretty big on just like, hey, who are they about to sub in? Are they, and just keeping track of that, and even just keeping track of minutes.
Yeah,
I think that's super important. And then remind me what you said first.
Sure. So the substitution patterns, are they scripted or are you doing it based upon the feel of the game? Like do you have sort of an idea of who's going to play how many minutes and then you have to try and execute that? Or are you just kind of like, we need this guy right now?
I would script the first 2 sets of substitutions pretty much always, saying, and it was always, so probably, the first 6 to 8 minutes of the game, I pretty much knew how I was going to sub, and then it was field based from there.
Right.
I would say, I definitely believe kind of in the feel thing, but also you got to be checking when you get stats like, oh man, he's already played a lot of minutes and so hasn't. Because, you go into the game saying, I need to get player Z a few more minutes this game, or man, right, he gave me 4 points and 4 rebounds in 3 minutes and I haven't got him back in. Like, what am I thinking? So I think you need that reminder, because the feels important, but the numbers don't lie. And sometimes, you miss things because you're so fixated on other things. So I think it takes both. But yeah, that's kind of in general, how I went about substituting.
And perfect segue for, like I ask this question all the time in terms of, when you get an actual box, like the statistics, end of the quarter, at the half, whatever the case might be, what are you specifically looking for? What jumps off the page to you statistic-wise? And how are you then implementing change to your guys? For instance, like at the half, you're down 42-34. You're going to get that box score. What are you looking at? And then what are you saying sort of in that change room?
I'm looking at defensive field goal percentage. Like I'm like Luke Yaklich type thing. Like we're going to contest with every fiber of our being.
Right.
So I'm big on looking at, what did we allow them to shoot? So contesting is number one thing to me defensively. I always tell my guys, I want us to be the team that gets dunked on more than anybody, because that means we're trying to contest everything.
Right.
So that's that defensive field goal percentage. And I look at rebound differential some, and then just find one eye-popping stat. So obviously pick the 2 things that, defensive field goal percentage, because that's so important to me contesting. So hit on the 2 things that are part of like our DNA that I want to be important, and then find a third that maybe jumps off the page. Like, they scored 12 points off turnovers. We got to take care of the ball or something like that. Or, hey, number 5 came off the bench and hit 3 threes. Like, we've got to know when he checks the game, he's having a good game. So like trying to keep it very simple at quarters and halves and not overwhelm them. Maybe 2 to 3 things that we need, and go from there.
Love it. And then as far as the contest everything, I love it. It's definitely a theory that I implement myself. How do you teach contest, and what do you consider good contest versus bad contest at the 3 different levels: mid-range, 3-point, at the rim, that kind of deal? And are you subbing players based upon poor performance of contesting stuff? Will you give them the hook?
Definitely will give them the hook if they're not contesting. But at a certain point, it's the same guys either that are contesting well or not contesting well. To me, like contesting isn't like a streaky thing. Like there's guys who are good at contesting and always contest, and there's guys who aren't, like, and it's very black and white to me. And if you're not contesting, like, it's going to be hard to get on the floor, or you better be a hell of an offensive player.
Right.
Contest, how I implement it. I mean, I bet I spent 15 minutes a day. And this was even when I was a prep school coach working on closeouts. So I think working on closeouts every day, making a contest an important part of, anytime your team plays in practice or whatnot, but spend a ton of time on closeouts and teaching the technique I want. I'm big on teaching in Europe, especially. I would probably switch this if I ever came back to the States or coach college ball, but I want 2 hands high. And some people don't like that because you can go right underneath. But in general, like I said, my team there was so athletic. I would rather run them off the line and make them have to play, going towards the rim or make a play at the rim versus our length and athleticism. So definitely believe in running people off the line, especially, in the analytics world we live in today, where the 3 is better than the long 2. So let's, make them have to either shoot a long 2 or shoot a contested mid-range shot.
Right.
So that's kind of, how I go about implementing that. It's just, I make it very clear, like, these are the 2 or 3 things I'm about defensively, and that's by far the most important one to me.
And do you contest differently in different spots of the floor in order to send the offensive player in a certain direction? Like, are you trying to send sideline, baseline in one spot and middle in a different spot, or how does that work for you?
So I'm big on, playing like somewhat gap defense, stunting in the gap. We deny. So we deny on the first pass, they go to enter the ball in, we deny on the first pass and denying back to the top and into the reversal, but everyone else is in gaps. So you're stunting in the gap and everything. If we're going to give it up one way, we're going to give up baseline. So the ball swung to the corner, you're in the gap, everything. We're willing to give up that baseline one and rotate over, just because, I really believe we work on that a ton. Stunting, turning and sprinting and trying to, cut them off at 15 feet, 12 feet along the baseline. So that was really the only, and like my assistant coach thought it was crazy. Really the only defensive rotations we worked on were baseline rotations. Cause I'm like, we're just, if we were doing what we're supposed to do, the only thing that we should give up our baseline drives.
Right.
And for the most part, we had a good amount of success with that.
Like it. And then the last question before I move to a little bit of film, unless some of the coaches in here have questions for you. Last question for me is, they talk about hindsight being 2020. You picked a game that you guys did not win, though you competed very hard throughout. Is there anything that, when you're looking back, you think maybe I missed something in this scout? And like in your post-game report, if you do one, is there anything that you're like, if I had added this in, I think we would have had a better chance? Or do you think it was just, they out-executed you type deal?
We pressed more this game than I pressed all year because I thought it gave us the best chance. What I call fist defense, which we play 2-2-1, trying to burn 8 to 10 seconds off the clock, into a 2-3. And then at the 8-second mark, we match up. So we play three defenses in one possession. And I love it, especially if it's done right. But it's one of those things that just takes repetition. And we had a little bit of success in it, but we just stayed in it way too long in this game. It was a game, like I said, we were just scrambling, trying to make anything work. And I stayed in it way too long. It was idiotic on my part. And it burned us knee, and especially with playing shorthanded. But I thought, with timeouts and those type of things, maybe we could make it work and find some sort of advantage. Like I said, this was a brutal game for us. So just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what would stick. And we did have a little bit of success with it early, but that's, the classic coach's conundrum. Like, all right, you have success with something. At what point do you cut the cord and be like, this is not exactly who we are. And it's no longer working for us. What do we do now? And I just stayed in it too long.
I hear you. We're gonna take a look at that a little bit in a second. I got 2 clips of the 2-2-1. So maybe you can give us some of your teaching points in that when we get to that. If any of the other coaches that are in here have questions, shoot now. Matt, I'm gonna move to a little bit of film now. And just let me know if this is still smooth for you in terms of play. Is that good?
Yep.
All right, perfect. So this is the first play of the game. As I said, I'll play each clip 2-3 times. Just sort of talk to me about, what you see, what you're trying to establish. I put in that it's actually kind of like moving into ball screen motion. It starts with sort of a pistol action where it's handoff and flare screen there. And then you get another flare going downhill. What were you looking for originally? The play stalls out, obviously, and the player gets stripped out of bounds. But talk to me about what you wanted to establish, who you wanted to go at. And I'm sorry for anybody who's listening and not watching. Hand off to the offensive right side. He chases it and gets it back. The pistol screams like a flare. The ball moves to the point. Attacks top ball screen towards his offensive left side. Moves the ball to the corner, and it gets stripped out of bounds. And we move into a sideline out of bounds that I want to cover as well. But talk to me about where you were going, what you were hoping for here, first play of the game.
So when we started the season, we only had about a week to practice before the game started. It was insane. So I'm scrambling, trying to think, what can we run? So this is kind of the variation we ended up on of like the hurry up 21 Doc Rivers type offense,
right?
With our own little variation. So if it was the flare action like this, the flare action we taught, it always ended in a step up. So Zero, who's in the corner here, as this step up starting to happen right here, I want him sprinting through to the other side. And he doesn't for whatever reason. And like you said, the play stalls. But if he's not there, the little point guard here getting downhill, he gains an advantage. We're probably going to get something decent out of it right here.
Right.
And ideally right here, the guy who sets the step up, I want him to roll. I'm big on roll and replace action right here. So I would like him to roll. And then the big bald guy kind of filling in behind right there to the top for a high-low duck-in type look. He was very comfortable hitting a shot from the foul line if that was there. So that's kind of a poor man's version of the hurry up Doc Rivers 21 stuff. We spent a ton of time working on these 3-man actions to start practice all the time.
I love it. My question to you then becomes, with this kind of offense where it's a little bit more of an equal opportunity employer offense, so everybody can score, everybody gets certain looks type deal. When you call a play like this, first play of the game or whatever, do you give them something, one part of the offense that you really want them to try and get to? Or are you telling them, feel it out, let's see what we're doing, try and play off of each other?
I definitely was telling this group, this is what I want. Like on this one, I definitely wanted the roll and replace action, try to get a duck in, try to get either the replace guy filling back up and then chase it. So everything we did flowed right into ball screen motion. So right here, I would like the big guy to fill in behind, and then he can swing it to the corner, to the left wing at least, and then we'd flow right into ball screen motion out of there. Like he could swing it to the wing and then flow right into it.
Basically, we're looking at this and then this guy rolling type deal, right? This is what.
Yep. Big fella looks at the duck end. If it's not there, he's going to swing it to the right wing to the white guard, and then we're right into ball screen motion out of that.
Perfect. Love it. And then we move immediately into the sideline out of bounds. So he gets stripped out of bounds, and we set it up. I'm always pretty intrigued about a sideline out of bounds early in the game. Are you play calling at this point, or are guys going to what is their staple type deal? And then again, are you looking for one particular player out of the action, or are you letting them feel it out? And for anybody who's listening, basically pin down, zip cut. And then we open up and we've got the inbounder getting to the other side of the floor and turns into a bit of a blind pig action. So pass and chase downhill at the elbow. The inbounder fills in behind. And then this is sort of similar to the action that you were talking about, not roll replace, but your big guy is lifted, and on the other side, the tag lifts his man all the way up, and we attack from the point, shoot a little floater. Play call, or are they playing off of each other? Is it what you wanted to establish? Please fill me in on anything I might miss with my crude description.
Definitely a play call. So there's a couple of options. So ideally what I want to get out of this, so the opposite big on the elbow, he's got to make the read here. But usually what we're calling out of this, it's a hammer set. I want this big guy, the big guy on the elbow to get down on the block, towards the block, and screen the big fella for a corner, screen the shooter in the corner for a hammer look. But if it's not there, like you said, it becomes kind of like blind pig, and it's just right into a roll and replace. I'd prefer 6 to roll in here.
and then 14 to kind of fill in behind. We still get a decent look out of it, but definitely not the execution I want, especially 19 seconds into the game.
Right. And the floater from this distance, what's your philosophy on, deep paint twos, I suppose, or just slightly outside of paint twos? And what's your philosophy on the floater versus the set shot in this area of the floor?
This guy kind of had the green light for me. He was one of the leading scorers in the league, shot like 46% from three. So I didn't get too angry at him just because he put the ball in the hole. In general, I teach floaters. We work on floaters, all that. But I mean, this isn't, a floater with a guy on your hip from, 12, 15 feet away is, not the shot I'm hoping for here. I really stress like quality possessions early in a game. Like this isn't setting a good precedent. Like how we've executed so far, we ran 2 plays and we did 70% of the things right. But I need 100, especially in the first possession of the game. And that's, that drove me nuts. And part of that is just playing young guys and guys who just haven't played a ton. They're like, this is kind of a disheartening start to the game where we run 2 things that I think are good actions, but we don't run them all the way through, or, somebody does the wrong thing. And then all of a sudden we don't get quite the look we're hoping for.
Yeah, I understand that. Believe me. Your Peja basically runs what I would call a variation of blocker mover. So there's the high and the low screens and the circle cuts happening. So there's handoff flip action on the offensive left slot, and then he continues off of the flare at the same time. There's the turnout or the pin down on the offensive left block. The ball gets moved to the offensive right slot, and he just pulls an early one. Talk to me about defending this action. If you have it, this is still early in the game. If you have it scouted and have recognized it as one they sort of run a lot, and I think personally the quick shot works in your favor, but you guys are going under on the screen on number 11. Was that scout specific, or is that just sort of a blown coverage in there?
It's a blown coverage. The main thing I see here that is frustrating to me is I want 5 sets of hands out at all times as best as possible. So when he goes under here, the guy guarding the guy who's getting the shot, like he frees it right there. He should have his hand out and ready to fight over the top, throwing that guy around, especially in Europe. They're not calling that a foul.
Right.
And that's like a little thing like this kid, Stanley Davis, really good player, bumped up, played at Morgan State, averaged 15 a game as a senior. And like, I was on him all year. He scored a lot of points in this league, but I'm like, man, if you're going to make serious money as a pro player, it's going to be as a defensive player. And this is like a small thing right here where you get over the top of the screen and we get a little bit, he doesn't even get a shot off. That's what's going to get you paid, but you've got to be committed to having your hands out so you can feel the screen coming. But instead we let a good shooter, get a good look, and he doesn't hit it, but later in the game, he does start hitting them, and it burns us.
Do you, what is your philosophy on help side players? Are you going over all of them? Is that kind of your team principle?
Yeah. Trying to get over. Yep.
Yeah. Love it. And then this is one of their baseline out of bounds sets. Again, still in the first. You guys zone up, it looks like to me, on the baseline here. This set, they do actually get a pretty good shot of deep paint too. So I think my question was, my notes say improvements. I'm just kind of wondering what you would do to change it in terms of your defensive system. For anybody who's listening, they kick it up top and they're basically just playing at this point. So they give it back to the inbounder. They hit the top guy against his own who shoots a little paint lob into the gentleman who's in the short corner or dunker spot, who lays it in pretty much uncontested. Talk to me again about your rotations on the baseline and what you would ideally like to see happen here.
Well, first of all, when they align to take it out, big number 14, I want him on the ball. Butt facing the opposite corner. And we're trying to make them throw it ball side corner. Like that's the end goal for everything. I'm good with everybody else's alignment. That was just poor communication right there. And, we're kind of in a bad spot from the get-go because we're not doing what I ask. So I would say that would be the first thing. Everybody else's alignment I'm pretty good with. It's just we stress a lot when they're aligning, we've got to be communicating early before the ref even administers the ball, saying, all right, this is how they're aligned. You'll take right here. Stan, you take this guy. Montrell, you take this guy. But there just wasn't enough communication right here. Like ideally, number 10 on the block is before the ball's even administered is telling 14 and 6, hey, 6 gets to the corner, 14, you got the ball. You should have your butt facing me. So just, a lack of attention to details. We don't get burned initially, but now when they get it moving, where all of a sudden we're in a bind. Zero should be digging in here, playing at the elbow. He's about a step too high. And then furthest from the ball, I want them cheating up. So the guy on the block, he should be cheating up a little bit higher. I can live with them trying to beat us on his skip.
And then as for where the ball gets back to here on this offensive left wing, who's stepping to the ball for you, 5 or the original inbounder defender? And
I want 5 on the ball, and then the original guy digging down, and then farthest from the ball cheating up.
Yeah, like it. That would help your rotation in the back, obviously.
Immensely.
Post defense. So you talked a little bit about having the 6'8", 6'9", 270-pound guy who's just going to hit you down there. You guys are guarding. They got a turnout screen and they throw it into the offensive right block. Once it's in there, talk to me sort of about your cues. Is it scout specific that you're doubling? Are you coming on a first dribble? What are the rotations like in and around? And then, what do you feel about your closeout effort after this? So for anybody who's listening, offensive right block, he takes one dribble. You got basically 5 guys in the paint at this point, kicks it out to the other side on the wing, and he shoots a semi-contested 3, in my opinion.
So it's a call. They'll look to the side. We'll talk about, in a timeout or whatnot, hey, next time the big fella gets a touch, we're going. And I'm sure if you're listening to the volume, you can hear me screaming to go. So we had 2 different looks. We'd send one pass away from the top double, or we'd send the baseline guy farthest from the ball. So those were the 2 we spent a lot of time working on. Right here, I couldn't tell you which one it was supposed to go, but instead we get just 5 guys kind of digging in. I'm really big on stunting though. Even if we're sending a double, I want everyone else digging at him, faking at him, trying to make him think we're going to send more than one, or hey, he has to think about where the second one's going to come from.
Right.
But in general, we get him to kick the ball out, so it's a small win. And in terms of the closeout, like you said, I think it's a decent closeout. 10, good player, not a great defender, but this is him. I think he gives an adequate effort, and we get a hand up, and I can live with it. So good, okay possession, not a great possession.
Like it. And what do we got next? This is a simple one. I ask it every week. So we got an attack and a kick out to the offensive left corner. Transition 3s for you. Yay, nay. If yes, can anybody shoot them? Or, do you have to be the best shooter, have a sample size, that kind of stuff in order to be able to shoot them?
You have to have the green light, and the kid who shot it would be the only player on this team I would be okay with that shot on. And he shot, like I said, 46% from 3. Probably one of the best shooters I've ever been around. So in general, no. Transition, maybe if you hit ahead and he drives and gets a kick and we get it second side of the floor, I can live with that 3 a little bit more. But off one pass, there's only one player on this roster I'd be okay with that, and that's number 10. So
how does that get established? Just basically past performance in the games leading up, and then you basically are now at this point yep, you can do that.
Yeah, one film. I did a lot of, we do team film, but I did a lot of small group film where it'd just be guards or it would just be whoever. And I'm very specific, hey, this isn't a shot I want right now, and here's why. And just being consistent with that. I think it's important, especially at this level, just everyone has to have a very clear understanding of what I'm okay with and what I'm not.
Right.
And, like he knew I was okay with this shot. And, you know, if you ask all the guys on the team, I think they would tell you the same.
Yeah. And then the last one is also, or the next one is also from the first quarter. This is an end of quarter shot. You guys are down 2. And I was just curious, the ball's in your backcourt. And you run just like a quick little pin away action, and he curls towards the shot, hits a 40-footer at the buzzer type deal. Obviously a nice moment. You take the lead at the end of the first, but is this something that's drawn up for you? Do you guys work on this, or is this just a player making a big play?
We had talked about just getting a little rub action, and that player is our best playmaker. If there's one guy I want getting the shot off and trying to make something happen, it would be him.
Yeah, I like it. It's a nice moment. You go in on a high. So let's move into the the 2-2-1 back into the 2-3. To me, it looks like you're pressing for time more than anything. You're not really pressing to aggressively steal the ball. And then you move back into the 2-3. Talk a little bit about like your teaching points and where, if you trap at all, and then the fall back into the 2-3, how these guys are matching up, like when they should be communicating, who should be going where, and do you try to preserve any sort of matchups within that?
Yeah, if you want to run it back, I'll start from the –
Sure.
So like you said, it's definitely for time. Like our goal, I would chart every game as best as possible how much time was on the clock when they could first initiate offense. With that being said, you know, we would have a hard call and a soft call. The hard call, we'd go and trap, but that was maybe, 25% of the time. And then I gave the green light. I had 2 guys who I trusted when they were playing in the second row. If they felt like we could get a trap, they had the, permission just to go, and I just trusted them to be players. But there's only 2 guys I really trusted to make a good decision. If you go back, the other thing right about here, if you watch 15, he just does a little bit of a stunt here, the second row, like making them think and just hesitate. He was really good at doing this. He just gives them a little stunt like he's going to go. We spent a lot of time working on that just to get that little hesitation where the primary can get back and square him off. That was the second key point, but just trying to funnel everything up the sidelines as best as possible. Nothing too complicated in general initially, and then getting back, just scrambling, because every team's press breaker and what they try to do is a little bit different. And in general, there's not a ton of teams pressing. In general, it's just trying to turn the dribbler. So it's hard when you go to scout a team to be like, hey, this is what they're going to do when we run our fists. When we press, this is how they're going to. So even that, you kind of had to adjust on the fly. But in general, it was just communicating and scrambling. And the same thing, I didn't let my guys off the hook. Like, hey, we're longer and more athletic than almost everybody we play. Like, get your butt back, get scramble, talk, and we should be fine. And if they couldn't do that, I'm like, that's on you all.
I hear you. And then in terms of the falling into the 2-3, like I said, are people worked out into specific spots? Do you, I think I have another clip where you sort of fall back into man from the 2-2-1. How do you sort of talk and communicate your way through everything there? What are the teaching points for the 2-3 part of it?
I just want them in the normal spots they would play as best as possible. And then if you have to, if I end up if X2 is playing an X4 spot, then they've got to communicate when possible and try to get back to where I want them. But like I said, we're at 14 seconds right here already. I want them to match at 8. So it's constant communication. So it's, 2-2-1 into 2-3 for 8 seconds. Then we're trying to match and we're scrambling again and matching up. So in general, it's just a lot of communication. I want, the most ideal spots on the floor with the ideal player there, if possible. So just communicate. Like I said, I just don't have a whole lot of pity for guys. Get where you're supposed to be. If you have issues, talk through it. You're all smart players. Let's figure it out. And I think we had pretty good success with it overall throughout the year.
How much do you love this closeout right here?
It's textbook.
There you go. Love it. My only other question about the press was your second quarter, you're about 8 minutes left, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I remember seeing you really getting into it before this point in the game. What was sort of the cue to you as a coach? Like, what was the thing that made you decide now's the time to implement and put it in?
Just trying to shake things up a little bit. I may have overthought myself, to be honest, but I just thought they had been playing a big lineup, and we'd been a little bit smaller. So I thought, well, let's give it a try. Every game, like I committed to we're going to run some of our fist stuff for 2 or 3 possessions every game just to see how they handled it. And to get repetitions of it. Like you've got to sneak those things in. And we didn't get burnt by it too often. So usually somewhere in the first half, almost always we'd pull it out and just see what happened. And then sometimes we'd go back to it. Sometimes we wouldn't. But the main thing for me is like, I'm thinking big picture too. Like I'm trying to get some film. So every game when we go to watch film, at least we have 2 or 3 possessions where we can say, hey, in fists, this was a lot better this game, or, hey, we've got to keep working on this or whatnot. I think especially at the pro level, like a press is something you can get lost in the shuffle and maybe you don't dedicate enough time to it in practice or those type of things. So at least getting film of it, and having a reminder where, maybe there's a 5-minute segment at the end of a practice where we at least walk through, hey, we need to be sharper on this. And you can remember because last game, the 3rd possession we ran it, we did this instead of what we were supposed to.
Love it. This was just an action that I liked by you guys. To me, it sort of looks like a wide horn set, almost like your players are all the way up in the slots. So we swing to the offensive left slot, and there's an away screen, little rub action on the help side where you create a high split. The one guy's going to the basket, the other guy pops. We reverse the ball. It turns into a top ball screen. When it's in this top ball screen, it looks like it was supposed to be roll replace action. And then we swing it to the offensive left wing for a jump shot that he hits. Really good action, in my opinion. Walk me through it. Talk to me about actions and options, excuse me.
So one of my favorite sets of, even when I was a prep school coach, I was running it. So I would like to see a little more, less of a rub and more of a screen, but to the basket at an angle right here, especially versus big guy who wasn't trying to fight through screens too hard. And we had some luck scoring on this. But yeah, I'd like the screen to be better. Then I'd like, instead of reversing it, we worked on this play all the time. It drove me nuts. Like this play in particular, like I want 6 then driving it hard at the nail and 0 coming off for a handoff from the nail and trying to get downhill, either handoff or a pitch for a jump shot. But I don't know why he swung it there. But instead, we still get decent action here. Like you said, I want 6 to roll. Everything we did was roll and replace. 15, hits a shot here. Not a great shot, but he's a pretty good shooter as well. And it hits a shot. But a set I love, I'm trying to think I think it might've been this is a long time ago. I was a big b-ball breakdown fan for a while. And I think my man, Coach Nick, was big on this play. And I think that's where I may have stole it from, like 6 or 7 years ago.
There you go. I actually saw him around Summer League. I didn't mention that to you. He was walking around there, I'm pretty sure. So on this, you mentioned in an ideal world, 6 drives a nail here instead of reversing the ball, and you get a little bit of a handoff. My question then becomes, the gentleman who came off of the split, who's cutting down, which way do you want him exiting in that instance? Does he go offensive right, so over here, or the way that he goes offensive left with that action?
I would want him to go offensive right because that's the more natural place to go in a roll and replace action. Right. Like I want continuity in pretty much any set we run, and that would make most sense in a roll and replace situation.
Love it. It's a good set. Definitely like it. Might go in the playbook. You might see that wherever I'm at next. I'm just letting you know it might be stolen. We got an Ato Zone Attack is what I put in here. So, I mean, obviously you guys, you had the timeout and it's full court, and they actually ended up aligning in a 2-3. In my opinion, I think it was the first time that they had aligned in a 2-3. So I think my question was, did you expect them to come out in zone, or had you drawn up something against man? And your guys, pretty naturally move into the zone attack. Talk me through sort of your zone attack principles in terms of what you like. And for anybody listening, I mean, real typical 1-3-1 type action against it where they hit the nail and they get a paint 2 out of it. He misses the shot, but I mean, basic attack, I think.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we saw there in the zone, and we knew they were going to probably play some zones. We had spent some time on this little overload set we run.
Right.
So it's maybe just your simple hit ahead, get it back, send a baseline runner, and then, put an X3 or X4 in the corner in a situation where there's 2 guarding 1, hitting a flasher. Like I said, keep it simple, stupid. Like, it's a very basic, middle school teams run this, but, there's no reason we shouldn't have success. And we get a decent look out of it. I think keys are just that baseline runner. They've got to go on a sprint. They can't go jogging through. I want them to sprint and make the defense talk and react quickly. If you're just jogging through, the defense has more time to talk, more time to react. If you go through on a sprint, less time for them to figure out what the heck's going on. Get a decent look out of it. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the look we get. Some pretty good ball movement. Get the ball in the middle versus zone. I can't complain too much.
Do you run many quick hitters against zone, or do you just basically, overload, make the right play type deal?
Like I said, maybe had like 3 sets, and I would say most of them are pretty simple, just because you don't see a ton of zone. So I'm not going to dedicate a bunch of time to putting in a bunch of stuff. So yeah, in general, I'm not really one to run up. And to be honest, I'm not great versus zone with quick hitters, because like zone in my head is just, it's a numbers. It's like, American football, like hats on hats, they say, and it's just a numbers game, and that's how I try to explain it.
Yeah. It's funny to me that it works as well as it does sometimes, because I'm like, if you're a good passer, they should just be out of it. Like, let's go here. But
yeah.
And then apparently I can't spell full. I put in fullo. That's nice. That'll go on film there. Full court pressure, 2-2-1. I thought this was back into man. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it also looked like the press was a little bit more laid back even than the last one. And it looks like you match up here. So talk to me a little bit about differences between the matchup versus the falling back into the zone.
Yeah, we had just made the decision here because if you saw some more of the clips here out of it, they made some plays because they're bigs. Like I said, they had 3 good bigs, and they're all pretty good passers. They burned us a couple times early where this game, really the difference in the press was there were times where where the guards beat us up the floor, or we got them to pick up the pace. Instead of pulling it out, they were hitting the high posts and they were making quick plays, 5 and 4 playmaking together. So we went away from the zone, and we were still having success. I mean, here there's 15, 14 on the shot clock before they even try to do anything. Like, that's a win for us.
For sure.
But they had been burning us, big to big passes. So we flipped into just matching up out of it because their bigs were so skilled.
Do you find that you experienced any problems with the falling back into the matchup in terms of players being able to identify where they're going? And do you have any sort of like coaching tips with your guys to be able to do it? Or is it just kind of like, hey man, you got to be good at doing this. You got to know where you are on the floor and where the guy you're trying to go to is?
I would say, like I said before, this was the first game we played a lot of this like fist defense, this 2-2-1 stuff. So we ran into a lot of problems or just issues here that we hadn't, just because of volume size. When you're only doing it 3 or 4 times a game, like there's only so much you see. Well, this was probably the 12th possession. We've already done it in this game. So we just ran into problems we didn't normally run into. But I would say in general, like this lineup, especially like 1 through 4, like the 4 guys other than number 12, like I felt comfortable with most of them guarding. All 4 of those guys can guard 1 through 3. So if we had to switch and scramble and all that, like this is a pretty good pressing lineup. So like I said, there's not a ton of rules. It's just like, I'm not going to put a lineup out there where I'm setting up guys to fail if they get beat. And even the 5th guy, even 12, he can move his feet pretty decent. So I had, 1 through 4 out there. I felt comfortable them guarding the 1 through 3 on the other team.
Like it. This next one here is the first set of the second half. It says this was one of the better sets that they ran, I thought. I don't think they were successful with it, but I liked the set, so I threw it in there. Basically, there's a curl or a shallow cut underneath the free throw line, offensive left slot, and then a chin or rip back screen there, and then turns into an away screen at the same time, a cross screen underneath, and then turns into top pick and roll, but I don't think the spacing is great at this moment. Early pocket pass, you guys pick it and you head out in the other direction. This set, do you have, or is it just, you know, being played well by your defensive principles? And what do you see in terms of everything that's there? Could you play it better, or are you pretty happy with the way you guys did it?
We get hit by too many screens. I think our hands are down too much. And I mean, if you watch from the get-go, I mean, everyone's getting hit on screens. They got a lot of action going at once. There's two people moving almost at all times, which makes it a little harder to talk and see what's going on. But right here, he gets hit by a screen, his hands down, and now we're trailing. There's one time we get hit by a screen, and then this guy goes under. I don't want that. That's an effective screen, in my opinion, because he forces us to go under, and he doesn't have his hands up, so he doesn't have a choice. So that's another time that's another effective screen. So I would say that would probably be my main thing. I think in general, we do a pretty good job of trying to clog things up, but I just think it's too easy for them to get the ball reversed, and too easy for us to be screened, and we're always trailing. And if you're trailing, you're out of place.
Yeah. The small to big cross screen, or I guess you could still call it a flex screen, even though it's in the paint, that's happening underneath. How do you typically like to play your cross screens? What's the teaching point there for you?
So if you go back, essentially number 10, when this screen happens, I want him chest to chest with the big coming across, and I want him trying to mug the guy, basically. Like over here, they're not going to call it. Like literally what I would compare it to is, like, I like to make like American football references, like an offensive lineman blocking where they push their hands up in their chest sort of and get leverage, get underneath them. That's right. Essentially what I want to do. I want to be a wide base and kind of explode into him a little bit and make it tough for him to get across. Cause like, you know, like I said, the league we played in was kind of almost archaic. So there was a ton of like cross screen, flex screen action. And let me tell you, I didn't see one illegal screen called all year.
All year.
Like that. So like, in that one, I mean, I think he defends it okay, but I'd rather him go as soon as he comes off the screen. I want him waiting there, and I want him rocking that guy in his chest. So a little bit more physical. Same thing if you scroll it back. Number 6, whose man it is, he gets caught. It's too easy for him to get screened. Look, he's out of position. He's not where he should be, and then he gets mugged. So similar to how he gets screened, he's got his hands there. Like that's a good aggressive European screen. Like I want the same thing when he's coming across, number 10, to just mug the guy the same way, explode up into his chest and make it tough for him to get across.
Love it. I think that brings me to the last clip I have. This was one of your baseline out of bounds near the end of the third quarter. Really liked it. Little elevator type set action here. Sort of walk us through it for anybody who's listening and not watching. It looks like almost a box formation when it starts, and 8 pops to the left wing through like an elevator or a pinch type screen. Doesn't get the shot, drives left, and then the bottom of the pinch screen pops all the way up to the top and gets a long 2 that he knocks down, probably and 1 in my opinion. Talk me through options and how you feel you guys executed here.
Okay, so if you run it back from the beginning,
shameless plug of run it back. Just saying
that. Yeah. So ideally here, what I want is as 10 is sprinting up, we're gonna get into like a zipper action. So he gets loose on the wing, and then 12 is supposed to be screening for 10, and he's catching at the top for a middle ball screen. 14, the big bald guy stepping up into a ball screen or zipper action and then roll and replace out of. He just gets open early, and then they're just hooping really from there.
Right.
So like I'm fine with that. Like I think he made the right read. Yeah. So nothing too crazy. But yeah, it's supposed to be zipper action. He gets loose. You know, I would honestly prefer if he shot it there because he's a pretty good shooter. But instead, we get another good look for another good shooter. So. Yeah, nothing too crazy.
I like it. Thanks for taking us through. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. I think that's the end of the clips that I have there film-wise. Matt, man, I'm really happy I got to sit down with you. I think you're a very intelligent young coach who's on his upward trajectory right now. So I'm happy to have gotten to know you a little bit, spend some time with you at Summer League. Anybody and everybody, please take note. Obviously does tremendous things with camps and training and consulting and all that kind of stuff. But thanks so much for sitting down, man. I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you having me on. Definitely an honor to, what you're doing is pretty awesome. And just the list of coaches and all that, like to be in the same group as some of these people you've had on is definitely an honor. So I appreciate it. And I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thanks, man. You're right in the caliber, and I'm just along for the ride listening to you guys. So I'm having a great time. For all the coaches who jump on every week and listen in person, I have tremendous respect and gratitude for you guys. Thank you so much. For anybody who listens or watches at later dates, thank you so much. I hope you continue to find value. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening to Run It Back.